Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. When it comes to the black media in general, and certainly this channel in specific, I don't talk about religion, but in this case for this morning's briefing, I don't want to talk about black people in religion, though I do want to talk about the beneficiaries of white privilege and what is clearly their religion. And just for the record, we're not going to be discussing Charlie Kirk for the remainder of this week. In fact, I don't expect to be discussing him after today. But there was an interesting aspect to what happened in the wake of his passing that I do think needs to be commented on. Now, as many of you know, Donald Trump, he couldn't care less about Charlie Kirk, no matter how much of a front he puts up. That doesn't surprise people, but there are some folks who apparently didn't expect it. Now, he could care less about the death of that white woman, Irina Zarutska, just like he could care less about Charlie Kirk's death. A reporter asked Trump in the last couple of days how he was holding up since Kirk got murked, and Trump didn't even bother to respond.
How are you holding up over the last 3.5 days?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks. They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty. It'll be an absolutely magnificent structure. And I just see all the trucks. We just started, so it'll get done very nicely, and it'll be one of the best anywhere in the world, actually.
He just basically said fine, and after that he immediately went into a rant about how great it was that the ground was being broken on a ballroom for the White House and how great it was going to be when they finally got that built. How different the tone was from the Orange Man for what it had been just 24 hours earlier, that is, before they confirmed the identity of the killer. Yeah, all of that talk about going after these left-wingers was code for black people. We're going to be finally going after these black people. Oh, except they found out who killed Charlie Kirk and was like, oh, on second thought, look at that ballroom that we're building on the White House. You see, for the white supremacists, there are no core principles. All they've got is just situational ethics and moral relativism. Now, another thing I'm sure a lot of you have noticed is there's been a number of individuals and groups who've decided that they're going to be putting up billboards and putting up other sorts of tributes to Charlie Kirk as if they didn't know about Charlie Kirk's decade or so of anti-black remarks, as if they didn't know about his litany of attacks on Dr. King. And yet they're praising this guy, and what that shows you is there's a whole lot of individuals who may not be known to you as being part of the alt-right or the white right, and yet now a lot of them are feeling like, well, we feel like we have to say something. Yeah, they want to go ahead and do their own version of virtue signaling. But Charlie Kirk isn't the only one who's gotten this kind of treatment. He's not the only one who has just been an open, blatant anti-black racist and been able to get all sorts of praise and adulation from the dominant society. Why does that keep happening over and over again? Why is it that in America, a large percentage of the population, particularly those who have deep pockets, can't wait to be the first ones to praise a bunch of slave owners and open bigots and racists and traitors like the Confederacy? Why does that keep happening? Why do they insist on giving sympathy to the devil? Why do they make it a point in this country to take the absolute worst, the scum of the earth, and just go out of their way to put them on a pedestal? What drives them to do that? Because it is literally an article of faith for the white supremacists on the left and the right. They all worship at the same altar. When the statues of those slave owners were getting torn down a few years back, you saw a lot of white Democrats and people on the so-called left who felt personally threatened by seeing that. And why would that be the case? Because they know that their positions in the world were given to them by the exact same white supremacists who gave that to their Republican and right-wing counterparts. They all depend on the exact same system of goodies, giveaways, and guarantees for their place in the world. What we are up against is a religion, no different than when these white authorities talk about so-called radical Islam, except this religion already controls the world, and we're fighting to break its grip before it kills us all. We're up against a suicide cult. As Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, if they cannot rule the world, then they'll destroy it. And that's exactly what they're doing. All right, but what does that have to do with the insistence by those in the dominant society to put bigots and racists and all of these horrible people on a pedestal? What does that have to do with that? Well, in Catholicism, the Catholics have saints. These are righteous people who the Catholic Church authorizes believers to pray to because these people were said to have embodied a particular virtue or principle. So Christians, at least under Catholicism, will have specific saints that they pray to. And when you see the dominant society putting these bigots and racists on a pedestal, especially when they have a history of doing all sorts of vile and foul stuff, what you're seeing is the ethno-political equivalent of the exact same practice. They're not ignoring the evil that these individuals have done. They're in fact celebrating it. What they're doing is they're praying to and appealing to these satanic entities, and they're hoping to become as evil as they are. Whenever you see some slave owner who's being praised by the white powers that be, that's a form of worship. There's a very strong and perverted element of spirituality, quote unquote, that goes from the dominant society when it comes to these individuals that it chooses to focus its adoration towards. You see, what they're doing is they're worshiping them. They have demonic entities that they pray to. That's what it is. Whenever they have somebody who they know is evil as hell, committed all of these vile acts, and they decide that they want the society to see them praising and worshiping and giving all sorts of honors to these individuals, what do you think they're doing? These are individuals who are lionizing slave owners and, more recently, ruthless racists. White supremacy is heavily steeped in the practice of the occult and appealing to arcane forces in order to get their way. You see this among people from George Washington to Thomas Jefferson to George Patton. Remember, no matter what lies the white right may want you to believe, the founders of the United States were not theists. They were deists. They believed in spiritual forces, but they were not Christians. All that Masonic stuff they were doing wasn't from out of the Bible. These were evil individuals we're talking about here, then and now. When the Bible says we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, against the rulers of this world, what do you think that means? We're up against pure evil, and white supremacy is the worldly codification of that evil. The dominant society sold their souls, if they can be called that, for what few little goodies, giveaways, and guarantees the white supremacy offered them. And in exchange, they gladly support the satanic forces that undergird white supremacy. They worship the demonic entities like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. All of their heroes are just a litany of demons. That's what we're seeing here. This is demon worship. The Bible lists demons and demonic entities by name. And the Satanists also have demons and spirits who they pray to by name. And that's the reason why these white supremacists, they love chanting the names of their favorite little racists and bigots. These are demon spirits that they're worshiping. White supremacy has done that. When you see people lionizing and praising these evil monsters, that is them worshiping demons. These aren't just some degenerate human beings, though they were certainly the lowest form of reprobate. I'm telling you that the reason that they're so evil, the reason that these individuals are so demented in their mentality is that the dominant society gave itself over to evil a long time ago. And even so, you got some silly Negroes trying to convince themselves that these guys can be redeemed. Let it go. Learn to recognize evil when you see it. There are some who have tried to convince themselves whenever the dominant society uses a ballpark or they use a billboard or some time on television in order to lionize and praise some horrible racist and say, oh, we're going to give a tribute to this guy. The reason that they do that is they see themselves as being like the New Testament saints. You know, the ones who were sacrificed in the arenas for the sick amusement of the Roman emperors. Well, that's not really true. These guys don't see themselves as being like the saints, sacrificing their lives for the greater good of Christianity. They see themselves as being the Caesars. They see themselves as being the emperors, and that they are sacrificing the lesser and the inferiors for their own power. They don't see themselves as worshiping any sort of benevolent God. Under white supremacy, the dominant societies see themselves as being God. And that's why the mental and spiritual perversion runs so deep and cannot be changed. What we have is a relentless, vicious cycle of self-adoration. The evil feeding on its own evil. And that's the reason why it just gets worse and worse and worse. There's no bottom here. That's why the dominant society takes so much time trying to control the history books, trying to seize your understanding of the past. Because the entire point of history under white supremacy, as Napoleon said, is that it's a lie agreed upon. And the lie has two facets. The first facet, of course, being a lie about progress. Things may not be perfect, but we're making a relentless march towards perfection, and today is certainly better than yesterday, when in actuality the opposite is true. But the other aspect of all of that happens to be that they tell you the good guys won. That's one of the other quintessential lies that's emerged under white supremacy. The false concept of the idea that the good guys won. That's how they always tell the history, by the way. They always claim that in history, the good guys won. Isn't it miraculous how that always happens? But those of us who got our heads on straight, we know that the opposite occurred. The good guys did not win. How do we know? Because we are the good guys. And we can also look and see what it is that the dominant society does. Nothing good has come from it. So clearly the bad guys happen to be in charge, and we are waging a fight from our admittedly debilitated position to try to overthrow them. But make no mistake, the bad guys feel that they can draw a lot of strength and power from the demonic entities that they appeal to. The same way that we put virtuous people on a pedestal and we draw strength from the examples and the courage and the heroism of our heroes and sheroes of the past and present, the dominant society does the exact same things with the racists and reprobates from their own ranks. They draw strength, at least they get some vicious ideas for the next sick thing that they can do from these demented individuals who they decide that they're going to platform and put on a pedestal. So when somebody tells you that you need to observe some moment of silence for some racist reprobate, what they're basically saying is that they're going to be essentially conjuring magic and that they're going to be invoking some evil spirit, and they don't want you to disrupt any of that. To just meekly submit as demonic forces are invoked right in front of you, especially forces that spent their time trying to destroy the righteous, I sincerely hope that you are better than that. As I pointed out in last evening's address, make sure you remember who the individuals are who called themselves invoking the names of demon spirits and called themselves worshiping these evil forces right in front of you. Make sure you remember who it is, because what they're counting on is for people in general and black people in specific to predictably have the same old very short attention span. Whatever it is that they're upset about today, well, come this time tomorrow they will have forgotten all about it, so it's a victimless crime. That's how they see it. Worshipping evil, invoking demons, and deciding that they're going to be exalting evil spirits over you, you got a choice to make. And the choice is whether or not you're going to meekly allow them to get away with it, or if they think that you're just going to sit on your hands while they openly praise and exalt every demonic and evil spirit they can think of. Let them know that there is no chance in hell. You may have to stand up to the bastards alone, but stand we will. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Rhonda Handsome, Charles Hairston, Tommy Robinson, Deborah Cooper, and Morris Bodden. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.